Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take complex research, unpack it, and give you the core insights fast. We want you to know not just what was found, but how they found it.
And today we're digging into something really fundamental for clean energy policy. How do you actually measure R&D investment in photovoltaics, PV? It's crucial for policymakers, but getting solid numbers, that's always been tough.
Right, that difficulty is exactly why this particular paper is so interesting. We're looking at a top-down analysis, determining photovoltaics R&D investments from patent analysis and R&D headcount. Quite a title.
Yeah, and it's important to know upfront, this is an older study. It was published back in 2013, and the data mostly goes up to 2009.
But that timing is key, isn't it? Right before the massive global boom in PV.
Exactly. So we're looking at their methodology, how they tried to get a handle on spending at that really critical moment, especially the spending that wasn't obvious.
So our mission for this deep dive: understand how this study used these, alternative metrics, PV patents, R&D workforce estimates to figure out global PV R&D spending. And maybe uncover some surprising things about just how much investment was really happening back then.
Let's set the scene. What was the problem they were trying to solve?
Well, the common story, in policy discussions was that PV R&D was pretty low. Some estimates were even saying less than 1.5% of company sales. If money was being spent, why was it so hard to actually track it?
It really boiled down to data availability or lack thereof. You had companies all over the world, many private, not all using the same accounting, not all reporting R&D separately. Trying to collect that bottom up was, almost impossible.
So scattered data, inconsistent reporting.
Right. And that created a vacuum where those low estimates, like that 1.5% number, could just kind of stick around, influencing policy maybe more than they should have.
Okay, so the traditional approach wasn't working. They needed something else. What was their big idea?
Their big idea was to flip it. Instead of chasing elusive financial reports, they developed what they called a top-down approach. Let's look at indicators that are public, that are tangible.
Things like patents.
Exactly. Patents, and also trying to estimate the R&D workforce, the number of researchers involved, things you could potentially count or estimate more reliably on a global scale.
But they didn't just jump straight to patents, did they? I think they did try that bottom-up approach first, just to see what they could find from company reports.
They did, yeah. It was like a sanity check. They gathered hundreds of reports, whatever they could get their hands on, and even that partial picture was revealing.
What did it show?
Just from those available reports, they found corporate R&D in 2009 was at least 3,100 million euros. So 3.1 billion euros.
Okay, 3.1 billion. And how did that compare to company sales?
That was the kicker. For those companies, it worked out to roughly 6 to 7% of their sales.
Wow. So right there, that 1.5% narrative just kind of evaporates.
Completely. Even the incomplete bottom-up data showed investment was way higher than commonly thought.
So that 3.1 billion is a floor, a minimum. But it obviously wasn't the whole picture. How did they use patents then to build out that estimate and capture the missing pieces?
Right. That's where the core of their top-down model comes in. They needed a way to connect the number of patents to the amount of money spent. First, they focused on the idea of a patent family.
Can you explain that quickly? What's a patent family?
Sure. It's not just one patent filed in one country. It's all the related patent filings that claim priority from an initial application, but filed across different patent offices internationally. It shows a more significant inventive effort.
Okay, so a patent family is a better indicator of serious R&D than just a single filing. How did they put a price tag on one?
They looked at a specific group of 45 companies where they did have good data, both detailed R&D spending reports and patent counts. They crunched the numbers for this group.
And found a ratio.
Yes. They found that, on average, across this group, one patent family corresponded to about 1.3 million euros of R&D investment, using 2009 euros.
1.3 million euros per patent family. But you mentioned earlier some leading companies might be more efficient, maybe spending less per patent.
That's true. They noted that some top performers might generate a patent family for maybe 0.6 to 0.8 million euros.
So using a higher 1.3 million average, wouldn't that risk underestimating the total global investment if the most innovative firms are more productive?
It's a fair point. They acknowledged this trade-off. Choosing 1.3 million was arguably a more conservative approach. It reflected the broader average, including potentially less efficient companies worldwide, rather than just the absolute cutting edge. It aimed for a robust, defensible baseline.
Okay, a conservative baseline. So they take this average cost, 1.3 million euros per patent family, and apply it globally to all the PV patent families they identified. What number did that give them?
That top-down calculation led them to estimate the total annual corporate PV R&D investment was around 6.0 billion euros in 2009.
6 billion. So almost double the initial 3.1 billion they found just from the partial company reports.
Exactly. It showed how much activity the patent analysis was capturing that traditional financial reporting just missed entirely. And when they added in estimates for public funding supporting tech R&D, the total came closer to 6.5 billion euros for that year.
6 billion euros in corporate R&D alone back in 2009. That's a fundamentally different picture of the industry at that time. But patents tell us more than just money, right? They can show trends.
Oh, absolutely. The study showed how patent filing trends mirrored the big phases of PV development.
Like what?
Well, you could see the first phase, very early on, late 50s, focused on space applications. Then the second phase kicks in around 1975, shifting to off-grid uses on Earth.
And the third phase, the one leading up to the big market growth.
That's the move to on-grid systems. They saw patent filings really take off after 1997, consistently over 1,000 per year, clearly marking that shift.
And did the patents show who was doing the innovating? Were there geographic shifts?
Definitely. The early work was dominated by the US, Germany, UK, France. Japan came in strong during that second off-grid phase.
But the study caught a newer trend, right? Leading up to 2008.
Yes, a really significant one. In that decade, you saw players from South Korea, Taiwan, and China rapidly increasing their share of international PV patent families. It showed how effectively they were transferring knowledge from the semiconductor industry into PV.
And here's a fascinating detail you pointed out from the study, looking at who held the patents in 2008.
Right. This really highlights how R&D leads the market. They found several companies that were major PV patent holders, big names like Samsung, LG, Sony, even General Electric.
Okay.
But these companies hadn't actually started selling PV products yet, or were maybe just gearing up to enter the market.
So the patents showed their strategic intent years before products hit the shelves. That's foresight.
It's R&D acting as an early warning system for where the industry is going, and you saw that in the technology focus too.
Yeah.
Well, crystalline silicon, CSI, was dominant in the market, maybe 81% market share back then, but it only accounted for about half, maybe 50% of the technology-specific patents.
Interesting. So nearly half the R&D patent activity was focused elsewhere. Where was that effort going?
It suggested a big push towards diversification, towards next-generation tech. The study specifically mentioned things like dye-sensitized solar cells, DSSC, and organic PV, OPV. These emerging technologies accounted for maybe 20–30% of the tech-specific patents.
So significant bets were being placed on future technologies, not just improving the current market leader.
Exactly. A clear signal of long-term R&D strategy across the industry.
Okay, so we have the money estimate, 6 billion corporate R&D. We have the trends from patents. What about the people? Did they estimate the workforce?
They did. That was the other part of their top-down approach. They used an average R&D cost per employee estimated at about 115,000 euros in 2009 terms.
And applying that to the overall R&D spending estimate.
It led them to calculate a global PV R&D workforce of approximately 69,000 researchers in 2009.
69,000 people. And they noted that number had grown significantly.
Massively. By about a factor of 5 just in the previous decade. It really underscored this almost hidden explosion in investment in human capital focused on PV.
So let's pull this together. What's the so what? The study found R&D spending wasn't low at all. It was actually comparable to the semiconductor industry, maybe 6–13% of PV sales. This fundamentally challenged that old narrative, right?
Absolutely demolished it. The idea that PV was suffering from insufficient R&D was just not supported by their analysis. Based on this strong finding, they then suggested some policy direction.
What do they recommend?
3 main pillars. First, keep pushing the science-dedicated R&D in semiconductor physics to boost efficiency, especially for third-generation PV concepts.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, focus on integration. More interdisciplinary R&D looking at PV combined with battery storage, aiming for systems that could stand on their own without subsidies.
Getting away from reliance on subsidies. And the third pillar?
That was about deployment and equity. Using international bodies, like IRENA or GZ, to accelerate PV adoption in sunny regions, especially places still burning subsidized fossil fuels like diesel, spreading the benefits.
It links the R&D back to the bigger global energy picture.
Hmm.
The study put this in context too, didn't it? Comparing potential PV scale to past spending.
Yeah, they highlighted the huge potential market, maybe 4,200 gigawatts of installed PD capacity projected eventually. And then they kind of dryly noted how much had been spent historically on other massive projects.
Like military spending.
Exactly. Or the Apollo program, they put a figure of 158 billion euros on that in 2009 money. The point being, the investment needed for a massive solar transition, while significant, wasn't unprecedented compared to other historical spending.
And yet, public funding priorities at the time.
We're still heavily tilted. Even in 2008, they noted about half of public energy R&D funding was still going to fossil fuels and nuclear. Their analysis showed private industry was already betting big on PV. The policy environment hadn't quite caught up.
The paper ends with a rather strong call to action, referencing the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. What was the message there?
It was essentially a call for responsibility within the scientific community itself. They argued that scientists needed to be proactive in challenging misleading narratives like the low R&D myth to make sure that both public and private efforts were really aligned with pushing sustainable energy forward.
A powerful conclusion. Okay, so let's recap the key takeaway for you, our listener. This 2013 study, using a clever top-down analysis based on patents and workforce estimates, showed that corporate PV R&D was already substantial and growing fast by 2009, around 6.0 billion euros annually, driven by about 69,000 researchers globally. Far from lagging, the sector was buzzing with innovation.
Which leaves us with a final thought. This study revealed that major patent holders in 2008 often weren't even selling products yet. So thinking about today, how might a close look at current patent filings, who's filing, and what specific technologies give us clues about where the next big PV breakthroughs might come from, and perhaps who the next generation of industry leaders will be?
Something definitely worth thinking about. A huge thanks to the authors of that insightful paper, a top-down analysis, determining photovoltaics R&D investments for patent analysis and R&D headcount. Join us next time for another deep dive.